Camilla's son just got dragged out of a royal estate after committing a crime. So embarrassing, it left everyone who witnessed it completely stunned. Prince Edward told him plainly, "You do not belong here." Then he had him removed without a second thought. Tom Parker B.S. was shaking with rage. Too humiliated to think straight, he went straight for his phone and called Camilla. Camilla exploded. She screamed at Edward to release her son immediately. Then Edward said just one word that collapsed every bit of power Camilla believed she had. Then he hung up while she was still screaming. When William found out what had gone down, what he did next made Camilla wish the whole thing had never started. The night mother and son got humiliated. Edward had never felt anything close to this kind of rage in his entire life. How dare he? That was the only thought hammering through him as he moved hard toward that pavilion. How dare a 50-year-old man, a man who had never served a single day, never sacrificed a single thing, never earned a single room he walked into, take a sovereign estate worth £500 million and turn it into his own cash machine the moment the king left the country? How dare he take William's constitutional inheritance, ground that had been held in trust for the future king of England across generations, and treat it like a higher venue he could dress up for investors? The arrogance was suffocating, and whatever had made Tom Parker B.S. feel this safe for this long. Edward was about to rip it out by the route tonight. While the king was abroad, Tom walked onto the Dush of Cornwall and threw the doors open like he owned the place. He set up a full corporate gala. He plugged his catering equipment into the estate's power supply like he paid the bills there. And then he put up a crest. It looked like the royal crest. It was not the royal crest. He had changed just enough of it to stay out of a courtroom. Some guests looked at it and felt something was wrong, but could not name it. Others saw it the second they walked in, and they knew exactly what it was. They knew exactly what he was, and there was only one word for it: thief. Tom had done all of this with a room packed full of London's most powerful people, charging corporate sponsors for the honor of standing on ground that belonged to the future king. William had already known about all these, and he had already called for a full audit. The result was very devastating. The Dush was losing hundreds of thousands of pounds because Tom had been running private commercial events on the land and pocketing every cent. His equipment had chewed through heritage buildings that had survived for centuries. His team had punch gaps in his state security so wide that any guest he chose to invite could walk straight onto Crown property without a single proper check. Every repair bill, every breach, every lost pound fed straight back to William's desk. Edward carried all of that with him as he pushed through the doors that night. Rain was hammering down outside. He did not slow down once. Inside the hall, Tom was full of smiles. He was gliding between his investors, holding a glass of wine. He was completely at ease, like a man who believed this was his house, because as far as he was concerned, it was. Then Edward walked in, and the whole room seized their breath. Well, everyone except Tom. Tom had no idea that Edward's men had already arrived before him. They had gone directly to the kitchens before a single person in that room even registered what was unfolding. Power connections were being cut one by one. Equipment was being pulled free and logged. Kitchen staff were being told to walk away from their stations. The whole thing was already in motion by the time Tom looked up and saw Edward standing there perfectly still watching him. Tom knew the moment he saw him that this was not going to be good for him. And what did he do with that knowledge? He squared his shoulders, raised a champagne glass, and smiled. Then he walked straight over. "You have no right to be here," Tom said loud enough to carry across the room. "This event runs under the direct authority of the Queen of England." He said it with a grin that told everyone watching he was enjoying this. Edward said nothing. That silence hit Tom harder than any words could have. Tom had never liked Edward. He thought Edward was too stiff, too proper, too comfortable playing by rules that Tom had never respected. He thought Edward was boring, irrelevant, and now he had a full audience and years of that contempt sitting right behind his teeth. Something in him must have known he was about to go too far, but couldn't stop himself. So he began raining insults. He looked Edward square in the face and said, "You know what? You are a ghost with a title. A man whose name means so little it cannot even open a door." He waved his arm across the room, making sure every guest was watching, making sure every eye was on this moment. "William sent you, didn't he? Couldn't be bothered to show up himself, so he sent his uncle to do it, because that is all you are. Somebody's errand boy in an expensive coat." Edward still said nothing, and that silence gave Tom everything he needed to keep going. He told Edward that his whole generation was finished, that real power now belonged to people who understood the modern world, not men who inherited a title and called it relevance. And then he said the thing that made every single person in that room go quiet. He said the Parker B.S. family was the future of this institution. That people like him, people with connections, with influence, with a real place in today's world, were the people this monarchy actually needed. Not old men who had already been pushed to the edges and just had not accepted it yet. He looked straight at Edward the whole time he said it. He wanted Edward to feel every single word. Edward let him finish. Then he spoke. His voice was so low and so level that the people standing furthest from him leaned in just to catch it. He told Tom that he had no right whatsoever to host a gala here. This land belonged to the Prince of Wales. He made it clear that Camilla was not the authority on these grounds. That her name, her position, her blessing counted for nothing here. Every person in that room understood exactly what he was not saying out loud. Tom Parker B.S. was nobody here. Then he told Tom he had 60 minutes. 60 minutes to remove every piece of his equipment and every person he had brought onto this property. Anyone still standing on this land when that hour ran out would be arrested for criminal trespass on sovereign ground. He held eye contact with Tom until the message landed. Then he turned and gave his men the nod. They got to work immediately. The kitchen power died first. Catering staff stood in sudden darkness, hands at their sides. Wine crates were carried out the door. The version of the royal crest Tom had mounted on the wall, like a trophy, was stripped off and removed. Guests sat exactly where they were and watched, and not one of them made a sound. Tom's face had gone deep red. He grabbed his assistant by the arm, whispered something sharp into his ear, and within 2 minutes, a call was going through. It was Camilla. Camilla's voice came through hard and furious. She ordered Edward to stand down immediately. She would not have her son dragged through a public humiliation. She would take it to the king personally, handle it inside the family, and none of this heavy-handed intervention was necessary or welcome. Edward reached out, took the phone from his aide's hand, and ended the call while she was still speaking. Every jaw in the room dropped. The room had just watched the Queen of England get cut off. And Tom Parker B.S., standing in the ruins of his own gala, understood completely at that moment that no rescue was coming. The only thing left was to get out, and to get out now. He did not go quietly. Nobody who knew him would have expected him to. As this state warden steered him toward the exit, he started screaming. He said Charles had never truly been a king, that he was a man who spent 40 years standing in a corridor, and was now spending his reign being quietly managed by his own son. He called William controlling, suspicious, a man so consumed by protecting his future throne that he was tearing his own blood apart over it. He called Edward a hired hand, a man too hollow for his own fights, loaned out like a piece of equipment. Then came the threats. He said he had been in rooms where conversations happened that were never meant to be heard. He knew things about the king, about Harry, who Tom himself called the foolish son who ran away and left everything behind, about William, about Kate, who he called pretentious to her name, right there in front of witnesses. He said he had enough on all of them to rip this family open in front of the whole world. And if this was the war they wanted, they should be very certain they knew what it was going to cost them. He was still screaming when one of the wardens shut the door on him. Behind that door, not one person in that room had moved to help him. Not a single guest who had eaten his food and drunk his wine and used his name to get into that room had taken even one step toward him. Some of them looked genuinely stunned. What had possessed this man to stand there and go after the entire royal family by name?